open up the drain. Make sure you have a drain bucket underneath here. Just loosen this up. Drain the coolant out. There we go. Pull this cover up. Just grab it, raise it up. It's just held on by rubber grommets. Before we go any further, we just want to loosen up these bolts that go on the water pump pulley. Just use a 10mm wrench while the serpentine belt's still on there. It's going to just help hold the pulley while you loosen them. Don't take them out, just loosen them a little bit. Take the lug nuts off, use a 21mm socket, and remove the wheel. Remove this cover. There's 2 bolts right here. Take those out. There's another one back here behind this, and then right there. And they're all 10mm bolts. Use a 10mm socket. Take those out. Now just slide this cover out of the way. The belt tensioner is right here. You can use a 19mm socket on a ratchet, or if you have a belt tensioner tool, you can use that as well. Loosen up the tension on the belt, and then slide the belt off. While we're underneath here, we can access some of the water pump bolts. So for right now, I'm going to take some of these out. Use a 10mm socket. Take those out. As you're taking these bolts out, you might get some coolant dripping from there, so make sure you have a drain bucket underneath. This bolt right here is a hex bit. Use a hex bit, a 6mm. And this other bolt right here is a 12mm. Use a 12mm socket to get this one off. Next, to gain more access, we're going to take this engine mount off, but before we do that, we need to support the engine from underneath. So underneath the oil pan, we're going to take a floor jack and a block of wood and just support underneath. You don't have to put a lot of pressure on it, just a little bit. Take a 17mm socket, take these 3 bolts out. Just going to leave this one a couple threads in. The engine's going to shift a little bit. It's okay. And then we'll take these 3 bolts out, or 2 bolts there, and then this nut over here. Use the same 17mm socket. Just grab the mount and slide it up and out of the way. Now we can take these bolts out for the pulley. Just use a 10mm socket. To get the pulley off, you may have to raise the front of the engine up a little bit more. Use the jack, just raise it up. There we go. Now if you take a look at the new water pump, you're going to remove the remaining bolts. There's one right here, there, 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 and right there. And they're going to be either a 10mm bolt, like this one, or a 12mm bolt. So take those off. This bolt right here is not going to come out all the way, which is okay because the water pump itself is slotted. So just pull that out a little bit. And this is the last bolt that's in here. And you can grab the water pump and just try to pry it off. It might be stuck a little bit. You can use a pry bar, just try to pry it off. There's some alignment pins that are a little bit rusty, so you just got to work it back and forth and slide it out. And there you go. Now take a scraper and just try to scrape the gasket off. There's a little gasket right here, and then there's the bigger gasket right here. This one's a metal gasket. Just That's it. Try to slide it off the pins, the alignment pins. Be careful because these can be sharp sometimes. And take that off. And then you can take the scraper or a razor blade. Be careful with the razor blade and just try to scrape the surface. You don't want to gouge the metal or anything, but just make it nice and clean. And right here, there's a seal. If you take a pick, you should be able to get that out. It's just a rubber seal, kind of like an O-ring. Take that out, and if you're going to replace it with this same style, put that back in, put a new one in. Just clean it off with a rag and some brake parts cleaner, or again with the razor blade, just clean that up. Now for this water pump, we're going to use gaskets. Slide this gasket in position. There's little pins. Get all the holes lined up. That should hold. You shouldn't put any sealer on the gasket. I'm just going to get the pump in the right location first, and then we'll slip this gasket behind after it's in there. So just slide it down. Get the pins lined up. Looks good. When you're putting this back together, these locations right here, these four, are where the 12mm bolts go. There's a longer bolt that goes right here. Pretty much the longest 10mm bolt goes there, and there's another long bolt that goes in that location. These bolts right here, these three on the bottom, are the shortest bolts, and then the other bolt that you have that's slightly longer goes right there. Get a couple of these bolts started. Now we can take this gasket, and you can try to do this from underneath if you want to. Just try to slip it in the right location. Just like that. And then take the bolt and get the bolt started. I'm going to put this last hex bolt in. I did put a little thread lock adhesive on here just because it had some when it came out, and that's going to go right in that location. Now I'm going to torque the 12mm head bolts, which are this one, this one, this one, and this one, to 17 foot-pounds. The next bolt we're going to torque is right here with a 10mm bolt head, and we're going to torque that to 8.7 foot-pounds. And then this one over here, and that's going to be the same, 8.7 foot-pounds. The next one is this bolt right here, 10mm head, and that's 8.7 foot-pounds again. Now the three at the base, and those are 10mm heads, and that's going to be, again, 8.7 foot-pounds. And the last one, the one with the hex head, tighten that to 19 foot-pounds. Now install the pulley. There is a keyway on the pump, so line that up. And get the bolts started. And then tighten these up. You want to torque these to 7.2 foot-pounds. Do the best you can with tightening those on. It might be easier if you have the belt on, again, like we loosened them up. Now slide the belt in position. Now install the mount. Might have to adjust to get it to line up, and put the bolts in place and the nuts. And tighten these down. Now you can lower the floor jack. At this point, we can put this cover back on. Just line that up. Push it down. Now take the serpentine belt. Make sure it's around all the pulleys. If it moved, make your adjustments. And take the tensioner. And loosen the tension on the tensioner and slide the belt over. And that looks good. And take the cover, slide it in position. And take the bolts, get those lined up. There's two that go over here, and then there's two that go in the front that you can't really see. Put the wheel back on. And the lug nuts. Now I'm going to torque the lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. I'll just go around again, double check. Now double check your owner's manual for the proper coolant. Add the coolant, fill it up completely. You want to run the engine for about 10 minutes, constantly monitoring the amount of coolant that's in there. After it's run and warmed up, you want to shut the vehicle off, put the radiator cap back on, let it cool down, double check the amount again, and go for a test drive, and you should be good to go. You can check the coolant level in the reservoir right here.